Today, I'm going to talk about log. No, not that wonderful kid's toy from Blammo, but the digital encoding method for assigning code values to photo site voltage readings. Exciting stuff on today's episode of Camera Tutorials. My name is Timothy Reese, and I've worked in the television, film, and photography world as a director of photography and a photographer for nearly 20 years. Check out my videos as we cover not only the how, but also the why of various technical and creative techniques used in the creation of real images. In all seriousness, understanding why cameras use a logarithmic system of assigning code values to a recorded image is an interesting discussion and will help you better understand and expose your log footage moving forward. What I'm talking about is the process in which the camera takes an analog signal from a sensor's individual photo site and assigns it a digital number, which it will later use to create the final image. For the sake of keeping the math consistent, we will use a 10-bit system in all the following examples. Now, don't let your eyes glaze over here. There isn't any advanced math. A 10-bit system would give us a total of 1,024 different values that we can assign to the readout of a photo site. That's 1,024 different levels of luminance or brightness. A sensor's response to light is linear, so that at 100% brightness, the system would return a value of 1024. If we cut the brightness of the image in half by reducing it one stop, then the value would also be cut in half to 512. The total range of values that we would have had at our disposal for encoding the image ranged from 1024 to 512. That's a decent amount of steps or variations. Take a look at this though for a second and see if you can spot the problem with encoding this linear response to light in a digitally linear fashion. I'll keep reducing the exposure so you can more easily see the issue. If we reduce the light again by one more stop, our new value is 256, and with a range of 512 to 256. Reducing it again by another stop gives us a value of 128, with a range of 256 to 128. As you can see, the farther we move away from that first initial reduction in light, the fewer values we have to work with. By the time we get to 6 stops underexposed, we would have a value of 32 with a range of only 32 to 16. So only 16 discrete values would be left for the camera to use. Remember, these values are related to the range of luminance that might be present in the photo site from black to white. Well, there are clearly more than 16 steps of luminance from absolute black to pure white. If we encoded an image using this method, we would have more than enough discrete values at the first few stops of exposure. But as we get into the midtones and shadows, we wouldn't have nearly enough discrete values to create a smooth transition from one stop to the next. This could create an image with an artifact often referred to as color aliasing or banding. Logarithmic encoding is the process in which we spread out these values more evenly, dedicating more of them in some places than others in an effort to smooth out these steps to create an image that has no noticeable gradients between each variation of brightness. The ultimate result is an increase in usable dynamic range. Each camera manufacturer has a different term for their method of applying a logarithmic curve to their encoding. Sony has S-Log, Canon has C-Log, Panasonic has V-Log. By the way, don't confuse the term S-Log with another term you might have heard, S-Curve. The S-curve has more to do with final color correction of your image and is a way of distributing these levels to create a pleasing image with a specific amount of desired contrast. Its visual shape is that of an S, hence the term, and has nothing to do with Sony's S-Log. Where RAW is doing no image processing whatsoever, shooting in log does still involve some processing of the image, especially in regard to white balance. RAW photos can have their white balance adjusted after the fact, but with log shooting, it's still necessary to get the white balance right at the image capture stage. The same goes for proper exposure. Where RAW has more flexibility later, more attention should be made when exposing your log video footage. It's for these reasons I highly recommend using what's called a LUT, short for lookup table, when you are shooting in log. A LUT contains a series of color correction instructions that the camera uses to give you an idea of how the log footage will look after it's color corrected. This LUT can be permanently applied to the footage, often referred to as being baked in. But if you're planning on color correcting the log itself, you can also choose to only have it displayed on your monitors and the camera's viewfinder, but not recorded onto the footage. I find this very helpful in making sure that your colors and exposure are correct. Since a typical log image is very flat and desaturated, it can make achieving proper exposure and white balance difficult without the help of a LUT. Speaking about exposure, I've long used a combination of tools to determine correct exposure of my image. Zebras are little highlights to your image that appear when those areas reach a certain threshold you set in the camera. False color, also referred to as predator vision, creates what appears to be a heat map of sorts. At a glance, you can use these color-coded areas to determine exposure values to your whole image. Lastly, many cameras have a multimeter, or a light meter built in, and a number will be displayed saying how many stops under or over you are from perfect overall exposure. But keep in mind, when using the multimeter on cameras, that is evaluating your entire frame, and suggesting what would be a perfect exposure if it were to be middle gray. If you have a lot of bright or dark objects in the majority of your frame, it might steer you in the wrong direction and make you under or overexpose. And one last thing about LUTs. Some cameras and monitors, even when displaying a LUT, will base the exposure guides on the underlying log footage. An easy way to check this is if the zebras and guides vastly change when toggling the LUT on and off. If they don't change, then they are based on the log and don't reflect the LUT. Now that you have a better understanding of how logarithmic encoding works, you can take a closer look at the charts that showcase each camera's system's approach. Remember, each curve has a specific amount of exposure that they will recommend for skin tones, and knowing that will help you get the most dynamic range and best performance from your camera. If you like these videos, please subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment about a future video you might want me to make. This user feedback really helps me see what users are looking for and ensures I can continue to make helpful and educational videos. Until next time, thanks for watching.